All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Persuasion by the Pint. I'm Jonathan Taylor, along with
Sean McCool. And today, Jonathan, we've got a special guest in the green room, eagerly waiting to share her knowledge with us.
Almost jumped the gun on the applause there.
Not yet.
Fingers getting a little twitchy.
Yeah, keep them waiting. Keep the crowd waiting. Yeah, so we got a special guest today. We're going to be talking about how to write persuasive B2B letters that command anyone's attention, including CEOs.
CEOs.
Yeah, so the top dogs. So so Joanna is, I just looked up her LinkedIn, little phrase there on the LinkedIn description, whatever that is. It says helping leaders and organizations build and safeguard their reputation while creating greater visibility. She's public relations and reputation strategist, fractional chief communications officer, founder, CEO of the Bismarck Group, Joanna Broussard. Now you can press the button. We'll bring her in.
Oh, she disappeared. There she is.
Welcome
Joanna, to the show.
Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me today, guys.
Yeah.
Joanna, I knew what you said was true because you know how you got my attention on the queries. Let me read your title that captured your opening sentence that captured my attention.
Yeah, for our listeners that don't know, so sometimes we'll throw out a query for looking for guests.
Yes.
And a lot of them that reply are just junk. Like they don't do any research. They don't do anything. They just respond.
Actually, I think some of them use AI to reply to the queries.
Oh, for sure.
Like but hers was good. So I'm going to read you the opening sentence. It says 17 out of 18 CEOs said yes. And then exclamation point. And then the follow-up, no AI needed. So I was like, all right,
I got to
read further. Yeah, that was a great hook.
Very, very well done.
What even more helpful is it's true.
Yeah.
So, so this is going to be interesting. We're going to be talking, Joanna's going to talk a little bit about her business, but I'm interested to hear, obviously we're interested to hear her story, sending out direct mail pieces, B2B marketing, that really captured the attention of some high-level executives. So, Joanna, we're happy to have you on. I know you're in the time zone where you're still at work, I guess. So you won't be sharing a alcoholic. You'll be sharing a beverage, but it will be a non-alcoholic beverage.
Right.
What is your go-to? So you have water, right? You have some water.
I have water and I have some coffee because it is the afternoon, but you know, coffee's an all-day drink for me.
Do you have a go-to water? Like, is it sparkling or is it just straight plain water?
I filter my own water.
Okay.
And that is my go-to choice. I keep it in glass. So no plastic allowed.
No plastic.
Yeah.
I like it. So, no, we have a water filter on our, we keep at the sink for the same thing. Just always having filtered water, ice cubes filtered, everything. So that's cool. Mm-hmm. All right. Because we were talking last week, our guest had water as well. And I pulled up a thing that, there's now water sommeliers because there's so many different types of water available.
Yeah.
And now we have water experts.
It's water.
Yeah, it's water.
H2O is H2O, guys.
Yeah, exactly. But, the mineral content, they say, is what makes the difference, depending on what minerals you have, depending on where you are, all this kind of thing. So, that's what a sommelier is going to have to say, right? To make make himself worthwhile. You're PR, you could spin that.
Oh, it's a terrible spin, really.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to take that client, probably.
Not.
All right, well, Jonathan, what do you have up in your neck of the woods?
All right, well, I've got something that sounds really refreshing. It is a tropical lager.
Okay.
Let's see, I've got let me pull it up here. It is called a lawn chair hot rod from Rheingeist. This is, I guess, a Cincinnati company, Cincy made. So I'm assuming that's Cincinnati, I guess. But it sounded really good. I don't know what to expect here. Easy drinking, freewheeling tropical lager will get you where you want to go on the double.
What's the tropical flavor in it?
It doesn't say. It doesn't say. It's
Just a little bit of
6%.
everything, huh? Just whatever.
Yeah, just whatever. So we'll see.
Like, is it coconut? Is it? I don't know what tropical necessarily would be. So it'd be interesting to see what the underlying tropical taste is.
It says no. It doesn't say what flavors. That's interesting.
Yeah,
it doesn't.
Just tropical fruit.
Yeah, that's right.
It depends on what country. I don't know. They're leaving themselves some room there to modify if needed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
It's kind of scary with the little art on the front, though. You know, you don't know what to expect.
Yeah, the little skull, lawn chair, hot rod, the skull. Like, there's a lot going on there for sure. I'm kind of in a similar vein, though. Let me pull up mine real quick. Mm-hmm. So I'm having Devil's Backbone. So this is a Belgian style triple.
Man.
This is 8%. You may be familiar with this from these guys here, the Black Quadruple. Those are the beers that I'm more familiar with Real Ale Brewing Company.
But this looks familiar. Where are these guys? I think we've had one of these.
We've definitely had some of their beers on here before. Yes. Okay. We've had the Black Quad, or at least I have. They're in Blanco, Texas.
Okay.
Blanco, depending on who you ask. And the Devil's Backbone is a stretch of road in the hill country of Texas that is presumably haunted. So that's why they call it.
If you get lost on that, if you run out of gas on that road, you are in trouble.
That's probably where the Texas Chainsaw Massacre happened. Was probably somewhere along the Devil's Backbone. So, yeah, cool can caught my attention. So
never drive that stretch on a after dark 9 p.m. at night.
Yeah, or full moon night. Yeah. Not where you want to be. Better than a dark night, though, I guess.
That's right.
Dark, rainy night.
That's right.
Although we would love to have some rain here.
Yeah, no. 100 plus.
Yeah.
What is it? That's probably just the heat index, right? I mean,
yeah, I think it's supposed to be 108 today. So,
man.
It's crazy. All right. Well, let me pull that screen down. And then, Joanna, we do a quick cheers. So we'll just cheers it up, and then we'll give it a quick rating from 1 to 5.
Let's have some cheer.
Cheers.
Cheer.
Mine definitely has that Belgian triple smell as soon as you put it up to your nose.
Oh yeah. I'm interested to hear what you have to score that.
Yeah, I'm gonna give this. I mean, it's definitely got that Belgian taste to it. Just like I don't know how to describe the Belgian, but if you like Belgian beers, you would like this. It's just a little richer than your typical Belgian. You can definitely taste the alcohol content that's a little higher. But I give it it's good. I would give it like I said, it's a little bit rich, probably not the best for 108-degree weather if I was on the front porch, but since I'm inside and it's air conditioned, it's fine. So I'm going to give this a solid 4 out of 5.
Ooh, okay. Good score.
How about, so tell us about the tropicalness of the tropical lager.
So I know what the tropical is. To me, it's got a little hint of grapefruit. So that's what I'm tasting here. A little citrusy, but it tastes more like grapefruit than like orange.
Or fruit punch or whatever. Yeah.
Definitely grapefruit, but I like it. It's I'm going to score this one a 4.4. It's really good.
Very nice.
Yeah, I like it.
Joanna, what do you score your bottle only water? Your glass only water?
It's a 5, guys.
There you go.
Come on.
So go to drink.
The country's heating up. We need all the water we can get.
Yeah, seriously.
I've got a bottle around here somewhere. Oh yeah, it's way over there.
You could just send us some water.
Look, I'm also drinking coffee, and today I'm actually drinking a New Orleans coffee, which is where I'm from. So I happen to be drinking today. I'm drinking French Market.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. Is that a dark roast?
Very dark.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. I like dark roast. I like dark beers, dark roast coffee.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the stuff.
The more potent, the better.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's jump in. This is exciting, Jonathan. I was excited when you forwarded me the email and kind of saw what this is about. So, Joanna, we've both been looking forward to this.
Okay.
So don't let us down.
Yeah.
I hope
Why don't you give us a little background on your company and yourself first, and I'm curious to understand what your B2B marketing campaign was, if it was in relation to, your own company, I guess getting, developing relationships with these executives, or maybe you could kind of build up to that and, start with kind of your company, and then we'll get into, what you did, some of your strategies there, and just how you're getting people's attention.
Sure. Well, I am a lifelong entrepreneur, even though I have often worked for other people on a contract basis as an employee. I pretty much have had my own company for 30 plus years. Always been in the marketing and PR field. I am from New Orleans. For many, many years there, I was the hot boutique shop in New Orleans. And worked with CEOs and leadership teams from mom and pop shops all the way to Fortune 500 companies. So, I've sort of done it all in the business. I'm kind of a generalist. When you're in a smaller market, you almost can't afford to specialize. You kind of got to know everything about the business. So I kind of, I've done it all, and decided a few years ago that, in fact, just before Katrina hit, about 2 years before Katrina hit, I decided it was time for a change.
It's a good time for a change,
Yeah,
right before
right.
a major hurricane.
Yeah, so I decided to start exploring other marketplaces, and finally kind of settled on Chicago. So I have now been in Chicago for about 20 years. And have just, it's been an interesting transition to go from a market the size of New Orleans to come to a market the size of Chicago. Technology has, of course, made that very easy in a lot of ways, because, I still had clients in New Orleans for many years. I've had clients all over the United States. So thank God for technology. Have done projects kind of all over the world for clients. So, I've been for, a girl from a small town in the South. I've kind of been everywhere. So that's sort of the background on my business. I love what I do. I love working with CEOs. They're my primary target. Even though I will also work with their leadership teams, with their marketing teams. But most of the time I'm looking to go in at the CEO level and work with the CEO, because he's sort of the guardian of the reputation of a company. I always talk about a horse goes where its head goes, and wherever the CEO's reputation goes, the company sort of falls right behind it a lot of times, particularly in smaller and mid-sized companies. You see that happen all the time. So that's who I am, and that's how I got from New Orleans to Chicago. The nice thing is that Chicago and New Orleans, I think this is probably something most people don't realize, but they're sort of at the opposite ends of the Mississippi. And believe it or not, Chicago is a French city, just like New Orleans. It was founded by the same explorers that founded New Orleans.
Really? I didn't know
They just sort of travel down the river.
I thought it was founded by Italians.
Yeah, there you go.
It was Irish. I don't know.
Originally it was the French, and people want to know, the politics in Chicago is crazy, and I'm like, no. They've learned everything they know about bad politics from New Orleans.
Sure. Yeah.
So, a lot of similarities between the two cities, and so it sort of made the transition easy in a lot of ways.
Well, to me, Chicago's really well known as like the mecca of direct response. Like they were the ones that a lot of the top direct response copywriters from the 20s and 30s, came up through Chicago. They had one of the first. A lot of the ad agencies, the direct response agencies were there.
Yeah.
The brands were over. The brand agencies were in New York, and then the direct response were in Chicago.
But this has also been, this is sort of the home of some of the biggest independent PR firms. Edelman is headquartered here. Golan Harris, which is now part of one of the larger PR groups. But it's a really interesting market from a lot. And you're right about the direct response, but it's kind of got everything here. And PR has been a big part of the Chicago marketing communications business. It really has.
Well, tell us about that, because you went into a place that had a lot of people doing what you were doing.
Yeah.
And you actually decided to use that as your advantage, from what I understand. And that's kind of how this whole these letters kind of happened. So tell us a little bit more about that and how you broke into this market, and then we'll kind of unravel it from there.
Yeah. So when I sort of made the decision, I thought, okay, you can't just go up there and open a business. You don't have a network. You don't have any contacts. I had friends here. I had been coming here for many years with clients to attend conferences and things. And I'd made some friends along the way. I had, some childhood friends here that were pen pals that I knew through my family. And so, Chicago always had a kind of a special place in my heart. And so, I sort of looked at 5 or 6 big cities that I thought about moving to, and eventually narrowed it down to Chicago. And so I thought to myself, now, how am I going to do this? Because I really can't go in there and start a business. Like I said, I don't have a network. So I thought, okay, let's look at getting a job.
Because this was really like pre-internet too, right? I mean, there was internet.
There was internet.
Not everybody was using it.
Not
really.
like
Right.
Nothing like what we have today. I mean,
Yeah.
It was rudimentary. It was probably at that point about 10 years old.
Right.
And
you were still getting AOL disc in the mail at that point.
Yeah, not me. I had already, the one thing, I'm a little bit of a technology geek. So
Okay.
I was already looking to what's the next trend? Get me on the next train, because this was way too slow for me.
Yeah.
So I used all of the resources that were available to me electronically.
Yeah.
And used.
What was that right after dial-up? Was DSL? Was that the next thing?
Oh, I can't even remember. This is so long ago now.
Is that right,
I can't
Jonathan?
remember what I was on. I think I had
Gen
already.
Little Gen X trivia.
I think I had already gone past the dial-up DSL stuff and was already on, modems and things like that. Like I said, I was way, way ahead of many, many people. And, I was one of the first people to carry a cell phone full time down there. Cool. So, like I said, I'm a geek. And I love gadgets. And so, the internet is forever fascinating to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I said, okay, how am I going to do this? I got to figure out, how am I going to break into this market? So I thought, okay, you're going to have to get a job, because that's how you're going to make some connections. And then you can decide, do you love it? Then great, I'll stay in the job. If you don't love it, then great. I can always fall back. I know how to sell. I know how to get clients. So boom, boom, boom. And then I thought, okay, now what? How are you going to do this? Because again, I'm coming from the outside. Chicago is very much like New Orleans in many ways. It can be very provincial. If you weren't born, raised, your family hasn't lived here for 100 years, nobody wants to talk to you.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, the easiest, best thing that I can do is try to connect with people that I consider my peers, other CEOs. And so I came up with this strategy. I'm going to look at all the agencies that are here, all the big PR agencies, from the top of the heap to the bottom of the heap. And I'm going to figure out 15, 20 that I think I want to talk to. So I went on the internet, I went to the library, whatever research resources I had, I used. And
I want to pause there for a second, Joanna, because that's very interesting, because you did the exact opposite what I think most people would just naturally do. I mean, you went straight to your what would be your future competition if you saw them that way, but you didn't see them that way, did you? You didn't see them as competition. No,
because let's face it, if I'm going to work for somebody, they're not my comp. And the truth is, even though we're all out there vying, it's like watching a tennis match. They kill each other on the court, but when they're in the locker room, they're buddies.
Right.
And the marketing PR business is a little bit like that. If we're pitching against each other, I'm going for it. I don't care if you're my best friend. But, when we're outside of that competitive world, a lot of my good friends are PR people.
Right.
Yeah.
And marketing people and advertising people and copywriters and video producers.
Yep.
So for me, the only people who could tell me whether or not I could transition to this market were people who were already here doing what I do. And so I thought, okay, let's figure out how we're going to do this strategy. So I started with where I always start, which is let's look at who's there and who's actually reachable. And so ultimately, I came up with a list of about 18 different companies. And some were the very, very big firms, some were middle-sized firms, and some were smaller firms. And I decided, okay, how are you going to get these folks' attention? They are CEOs, just like you are. Yeah. They're busy. They got a million pieces of paper that cross their desk every day, a zillion emails. They're on the phone. They've got staffs ranging anywhere from 2 or 3 to 200 or 300 or 1,000. Yeah. So how am I going to get their attention? And so the first thing for me, research is it. Anybody that's kind of in the PR field, in the marketing field, research is really the thing. I'm sure as a copywriter, Sean, before you start writing, you go out, you do your research, and you try to figure out, okay, what's going to help me create a piece of copy that's going to make this client stand out.
Yeah, because it's that one piece of research that can be the difference between just that insight that gets you in the door versus doesn't, for sure.
That's exactly right. And so, I went in, I did my research, I picked my companies. And then I said, okay, let's look at who are these CEOs? Who are the people that I want to talk to? I wasn't looking for a job. I was looking for information. And I was very clear what I was looking for. If a job was the result of this process, great. If it wasn't, that's okay too. Because once I went through this process and I did all these meetings, I had a basis on which to move forward. So essentially, I picked those 18 companies. And then I started doing research on each CEO.
Not the company, but the CEO, the person. So that's the key.
I did company research too.
Yeah, but you wanted to find out about them.
I really started with company research.
Right.
But now I'm narrowing down and I'm targeting now. And I'm saying, okay, here's the 18 people I need to talk to, because out of those 18 people, they're going to tell me everything I need to know about Chicago.
So how did you find out about these people? How did you?
Well, I want to emphasize that point too. You said you were looking for information, and then you just said, Joanna, you were, you wanted to know about Chicago.
Yeah.
You weren't looking for a job. You wanted to understand the environment that you just landed in.
Exactly right.
And that was your interesting. I think that's what probably your hook that started making things interesting for them, as we'll hear in the letter. But so keep going.
Yeah. So, I started researching them as individuals.
Okay.
Where was our common ground? How could I relate to these people? How could they relate to me? What could I use as an opening sentence or an opening paragraph to begin to build a relationship?
How did you, I mean, this was years ago. So what kind of means did you go about doing research?
I used the heck out of the internet. It was very rudimentary, but again, I'm a researcher at heart. I have a degree in history. I have master's work. If you're doing big time university work, you understand the power of research. Mm-hmm. And I understood that. I grew up in a family of educators and lawyers and people like that. So I understood the power of research and the power of knowledge.
Well, I would think PR companies leave a pretty nice trail just because they're kind of in the business already. So they leave a nice trail for you to follow for sure.
Yeah. There was a lot of stuff that wasn't on the internet, but there was plenty that was there. And if you know how to look for it, you can find what you need. So, I looked first at their company profiles. Mm-hmm. LinkedIn didn't even exist back then. I think who knows what was the social media leader in those days.
So what year was this? Just for context.
2003.
Okay.
So this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that was
it's a dark
MySpace.
age. I'm a dinosaur.
I doubt
here.
the CEOs had a MySpace page. Maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
probably. There you go. But I went onto the internet. I looked in the research sites. When I had to, I would hoof it over to the library and go through microfilm and whatever the library had available research. I mean, make myself crazy. Thank God those days are over. But the first thing I did was I looked at the company profiles that were available on the internet on what rudimentary corporate sites existed back in those days. And began to sort of form a picture of who this person is. And then the interesting place that I ultimately found out the most about people was to look at the sort of the society pages. What organizations were they volunteering at? What were they doing when they weren't at work? What were they doing as professionals in the industry? So I would look at trade publications to see what kind of projects they were involved in. I would look, as I said, I'd look at their background. What did they do? Where were the similarities between us?
I love that idea, Joanna, of what are they doing while not at work? I don't want to just run by that, because I think, Jonathan, you've told a story on this podcast before about how you connected with the CEO through baseball.
Yeah,
by knowing
exactly.
I know their team. But yeah, I think a lot of CEOs are involved in charities.
Absolutely.
And they pick them very carefully, right? Because it reflects on their business, on themselves.
Absolutely.
So if you can tie into that kind of stuff, it's so much more emotional too than just, running the business.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I really looked at who are these people and as professionals.
Yeah.
And as peers for me, even though, I ran a much smaller company, it was a substantial company. And I had some dynamite clients. And I had done a lot of work in the legal business as a litigation communicator. Not a law firm marketer, but a litigation communicator, working on big, high-profile cases as the media strategist.
So this is pretty time intensive. I mean, you're talking 18 companies. So, you're doing research on all of these. I mean, what would you think the time that you spent just, on the research side of it before you even began writing letters? How much time did you spend just
I would say probably about 2 hours a company.
Okay.
So about 36 hours over a couple of weeks, I mean, that's intensive work, and you can't really, it's not like you can sit down and spend an 8-hour day doing this stuff.
Right.
But, I was also getting ready to make a major move. I was about to pick my whole life up and move it to Chicago.
Sure. Yeah.
So, before I did that, I kind of had to know what I was getting myself into. So it was worth the time and effort, and it's always worth the time and effort, because the more you can figure out where the similarities are and where you all are working and you're copacetic, the easier it is to make the connection. Because let's face it, business is about relationships. If you end up doing business, great, but the relationship is the thing that makes everything else possible. So you have to start there. And so for me, it was about what could I find for each of them that would help me just open the door. And
what kind of stuff did you find? I'm curious, like some of the big stuff that jumped out at you. Like, I know as a copywriter, when I see a fact or I see something, like it like lights up in 3D. Like I'm like, oh, that's the thing. So what kind of stuff for you was like, okay, I'm researching this person. What kind of stuff stood out to you? Not necessarily, because I don't know that you always know what to look for, but you know it when you see it.
Yeah. The things that sort of, number one, I kind of wanted to know how active they were in their communities, and looked at the different types of nonprofits? Did we share any similar, like, I was on the board of the Urban League in New Orleans. So I looked for other people who had Urban League. And, Big Brothers, Big Sisters. That was another board that I had been on. I looked for people who were active in chamber. I'd done a lot of work with the chamber down in, I looked for people who had done a lot of economic development work through either big committees that ran adjunct to sort of quasi public-private partnerships. I looked at things that were similar to the kinds of projects that I had either done either pro bono or for clients. And so looking for that kind of stuff. The other things too is I looked for people who had kind of done it all in the business. What I noticed most is that outside of smaller markets, most people are very siloed. When you're in a smaller market, you almost can't afford to be siloed because there isn't enough clients to go around. And of course, in the pre-internet days, you were local for the most part. If you ended up with a regional client or a national client, you were lucky. But for me, it was trying to find those people who came up through those agencies and through the business and had more well-rounded backgrounds. And that I was able to find with quite a few of them. And so I was able to use that kind of stuff. So lots of different things. Mostly I stuck to the business side, but where the personal stuff paid off was when I actually got the meetings and could then ask them in those meetings. I see you're involved in X.
Right.
What's it like? What drew you to that particular nonprofit? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. So that stuff you bring up in a meeting, obviously.
Yeah.
Connection.
Exactly.
Liking effect. Yeah. Commonality.
That's so again, if you're lucky enough to get these meetings, you're not going in there, you're not going to sell them on the first time. First of all, forget selling. You're not selling.
Yeah.
You're going there to build a relationship.
Right.
Yep.
But you got to get the meeting first. So
you got to get the
which
meeting
is a challenge. First. I mean, 17 out of 18.
Yeah, it's a pretty good number.
So
I look, believe me, nobody was more shocked than I was. Because the truth is, you're shooting in the dark here.
And these don't make it like, Sean and I know these types of letters don't make it to the desk of a CEO because they get filtered in by the gatekeeper first, right? I mean, the gatekeeper sorts it out and they're looking over it. So you had to do something that was, even on the outside, before they even looked at the letter, that got the attention, that made it to the CEO in the first place. So if you would, I'm just curious, what did you do? Was this a simple one-page letter that you stuffed in an envelope? How did you make the envelope look? How did you send it? I mean, we're curious how you structured that.
So first of all, I did not send it as my company.
Okay.
I sent it as myself personally.
Cool.
Because again, I didn't want to come at them as another company.
No.
And I wanted them to get to know me. Because number one, if any of them were going to hire me, they were going to hire me. They weren't going to hire my company. So they needed to know who I was and what I was capable of. So all these letters went from a personal email, my personal address, all of that. The secret to it and how I got past the gatekeepers, and I don't know if it will work now, but then I sent every single one of them by Federal Express.
I think it works today.
Jonathan does
sent
that.
Every single one of them by Federal Express.
I can testify it works today.
Personal and confidential.
Yeah.
That is where I used my business address. Was on the return address of my Federal Express.
Yeah. But you put your own name. You didn't put the business name, right?
On my letter, it was on my letters, it was my personal name. But on the return address on the Federal Express was the business.
Right.
Okay.
So a gatekeeper didn't know, is this something he's waiting for? He or she is waiting for?
was like
or
a
what?
FedEx overnight. Did you do like an overnight FedEx? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's like important.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it was magic.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, I heard from all 18 people, only one did not see me at all, and only one sent me to somebody other than the person that I addressed the letter to.
Hmm. Yeah.
Wow. All right. So walk me through this, Joanna. I am CEO X. I get your FedEx envelope. I'm like, oh, I don't remember asking for this, but it's overnight. It's personal and confidential. It must be important. I
Yeah.
rip open the little thing on the cardboard envelope. And I pull out a couple pages. Is it 1 page, 2 page?
2-page.
Okay,
It was a 2-page. It was in an envelope inside.
Did you use nice like resume paper? Did you use? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I pull out this nice 20-pound paper, a little textured, probably linen texture. I'm reading it. What is the first line I see?
The first line you see is, "It's not often that I find another person who has, quote, done it all in this business. They are few and far between.
Going straight for that ego. I like it.
Yeah. Appeal to the ego.
We have this in common."
Yes.
Yeah. You know, that was my best. That was one of my best.
Can you repeat that one more time? Just
Yeah. "It's not often that I find another person who has done it all in this business. They are few and far between.
Oh yeah, stroking that ego. I love it.
Have this in common."
That is brilliant.
I love that because you the association. So what's that second line that you followed it up with after you stroke the ego? Then you say,
This is all the first sentence. So appropriately grammatically dashes and dots and various. "It's not often that I find another person who has done it all in this business. They are few and far between.
Yeah.
And it seems we have this in common."
Yep.
I love that because you're putting yourself as a peer.
Yeah, that's right.
You're not groveling.
That's right.
You're saying, hey, I'm just like you.
Yeah. You're on the same exact level.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I love that.
Great positioning.
You have to understand who your target is. You know, I thankfully, because I was a CEO and I ran a fairly sizable firm, I understood that they're busy. They want, if you're going to send me a letter, you better grab me in the first 7 seconds because it's over.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
There's two parts to that. First of all, you are putting yourself on their level, but then you're also, as you said, it's empathy. You're empathizing with the fact that they're busy.
Yeah.
You know that they don't have time for trivial details. They have to get right to the point. And so
the letter builds from there.
Yeah.
And again, the next piece, that first paragraph, that's the first sentence of the first paragraph. But the rest of the paragraph is sort of where I take and really put us as peers.
Yeah.
So the second sentence says, "There's something very important that those of us who have worked across every practice area in a multitude of industries bring to the table. A visionary perspective that enables us to craft the kind of innovative strategies that solidify our clients as leaders in their industry."
Yeah, this is that she gets me, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what they're hearing here when they read this. Like, oh yeah, this is definitely one of my peers. This is not somebody just pitching me.
Right.
They get me. I wonder where this is going. But there is a little bit of like, I wonder where this is going. Like, why did they send me this?
Right.
So now you've got them hooked. You've got a little curiosity brewing. So then you carry on from there.
Yeah. And then what I started to do in the next paragraph is really begin to build my credibility and why they should talk to me.
Okay.
Why they should give me 30 minutes of their time.
And how did you do that?
the rest of this, okay, so the next piece is relevance. Here's where we are relevant together. So the second paragraph starts, over the past 20 years as a public relations, marketing, and corporate communications strategist, consultant, and business owner, I've worked with clients from Coca-Cola to Waste Management to create innovative campaigns and programs. I have extensive experience in many practice areas and in industries ranging from finance and healthcare to the cultural and performing arts and environmental services. So they can plug right into that. Yeah, I've done that. Yeah, Coca-Cola is one of our clients too. So they know that I've worked with sizable clients. They know that I've worked in lots of different industries. They can then completely see how this is relevant to them because they've done the same thing.
Yeah.
So again, another relationship building paragraph.
I could also see it on the flip side. I could also see it as like a little bit of like, ooh, new competitor. Like,
Yeah,
like she's working with
a
some of
chance.
my clients. Like, ooh, maybe I should pay attention to what's going on here.
Look,
I could see that in the back of their mind a little bit, maybe subconsciously, even like, oh,
if you're gonna take the chance to, you got to be risky all the way through this. It's always a risk to go after a CEO as a client. You can't be faint of heart because you're going to get a lot of rejections, much more than you will at a lower level. Right? You know, so you're trying to get this person's attention. You have to build some credibility for yourself right at the beginning. Otherwise, they're not going to read any farther.
Social proof. I mean, you got some elements of persuasion in there, you know, liking, obviously similarities.
Yeah.
Social proof, you know, you're including that.
Whole name dropping.
Yep.
You know, just enough. You know, I didn't overdo it. I didn't give them 20 clients in that list.
Right.
I gave them just enough to say, hey, I've played with the big boys. So I get where you are, Mr. $500 million CEO.
Yep. That's
you know,
right.
I get it. I know what it's like to play at that level. You know, I may be in a little town like New Orleans, but, you know, I've done some big stuff.
Yeah.
So then where do you go? So then you go back to your research and you say, okay, part of your research is what's the trends? What's the trends in the business that you can pull in here to say, hey, here's what's coming down the pike. And if you haven't seen it, let's think about it.
Insider secrets, right? Like,
I'm being helpful, adding value. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on there. That's cool.
Yeah. So, you know, that third paragraph is where I come in and I say, and now I kind of start to tell them what's going on. So I now find myself with the desire to use my skills and experience gathered from working with such a diverse client base in a larger arena. And I'm considering a move to Chicago.
Right.
My approach to the business comes from a marketing perspective, which I believe provides a tremendous competitive advantage as public relations begins to take a greater position in the client's marketing mix as well as in the boardroom.
Sure.
So at that time, PR wasn't always at the table. You know, we were sometimes pushed off in the corner. I was lucky. The CEOs that I worked with down in New Orleans, they were always calling me, can you come sit in on this meeting and do another pair of ears for us? And then tell us how, if we take this on, how's it going to affect us? How are we going to either promote it? If it goes south, we want to know, how can it go south? How can it damage our reputation? How can it come back and bite us? You know, but a lot of times PR was not at the table. I was very fortunate. I had great relationships with my CEOs.
Sure.
My guess is you created that, it didn't just happen. You created that.
Yeah. And you have to create it, you know, you have to create it and you have to have respect for, you know, their time, your time, and for what you do. And you have to get them to also respect what you do. Even if you're a peer CEO, they've got to try, you know, people don't always understand what PR folks do.
Right.
But you can see that just doing these letters, I mean, doing these letters is just like doing any kind of a campaign. It starts with the research. There's a lot of, 50, probably 80% of what we do is all this background stuff, so that when we finally go to the New York Times and pitch the story, it's pretty much a done deal, because we've done all that background stuff on those reporters, on the editors, on what sections this particular story can go in, blah, 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 blah.
Make their life easy. Yep.
Yeah. And so that's, the next.
Did you ever get any feedback from, I mean, would they tell you, like, I mean, in a conversation, once you get the meetings, like, I mean, your letter is is pretty good. Yeah. How'd you find out about me, and how'd you, I'm sure they were asking questions, right? They're like,
they were, I think they were curious about why I wanted to come to Chicago. And there was lots of reasons. I mean, I was done in New Orleans. I've done every major company that was there, had been clients. One of my big clients was the Business Council of New Orleans in the River region. It was made up of the 50 top CEOs in the Gulf South. Once you kind of do that, you sort of done it all.
Yeah.
So I just, the other thing too is that almost all the CEOs to the letter had a New Orleans story, and they were just dying to tell their New Orleans story.
I love that. So they had some tie-in with that.
Yeah.
With that area.
I don't, and I will say, I don't think being from New Orleans hurt at all. I think it really helped, because they'd all been there 1,000 times for conferences, on vacation, for Mardi Gras, for different things. I mean, it's a great conversation starter. And so they all had stories that they wanted to tell. I had one CEO said to me, "Does anybody work in New Orleans?" I said, "Yeah, we do." Sure.
No, we all just kind of,
now we just gotta hang out.
We just wait for
2 days a week.
Every Mardi Gras.
Yeah. Wednesday, Thursday we work, but
yeah, right, exactly. So it was a very interesting experience to meet with all these folks.
Okay,
go ahead.
So you got 17 meetings.
Yep.
Right. Out of those 17 meetings.
Yep.
How many of those ended up in business for you?
Probably maybe only two.
Still, I mean, that's
Sean's deal about being a competitor. One thing is, when you've been a lifelong entrepreneur, the hard thing is to suddenly decide you're going to get a job.
Right.
And on the QT, when I would run into these guys away from the office, one or two of them actually said, "You had so much stuff that we wanted, but we were afraid because you're an entrepreneur. And we could see you would come in here, make all these connections, and 2 or 3 years later, you'd be gone."
Oh, yeah.
I think that played into it a lot. But
still, two business deal. I mean, two.
They weren't big deals, but they were enough to make me feel
worth your time.
To make me feel like, you can do it. You can make it in Chicago. You can find ways. It's a tough marketplace because it's really big. And there are very few centralized things like you would find in a smaller market.
Yeah.
It's it's a very fractured business community. It's everywhere. And business, you could be working next door to a $5 million business and not even know it. It's that kind of a city. But it's a really interesting marketplace. And this letter helped me say, yes, I'm going.
That's interesting, because so let's say you had 2 hours per company, per CEO.
Yeah.
You had $20 or $30 for the FedEx, back then. So it's not a huge expense. I mean, it is some time, it is some money, but it's not huge.
No.
What would you say the overall ROI was on that? Let's say 40 hours and 20 times 20, $400 worth of FedEx.
Like a 95% response rate and
Yeah. So what was your
What,
total
like a
ROI on that?
7% close rate?
I'll tell. Yeah, like I said, I really wasn't looking for a job, but one of the things that did happen through this was I actually ended up meeting a headhunter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, one of the firms that was on my bigger list that I didn't go and see, I ended up actually getting a job at. So
Okay.
the ROI on the whole thing probably ended up being, I don't know, 6 figures.
Yeah. Not bad.
I mean, because I got a senior vice president job. So,
Yeah.
There you go.
So
You got what you wanted.
yeah,
I mean, that's the bottom line. You got what you wanted.
It gave me a foot in the door.
Yeah.
I ended up, like I said, working for a company that had been on my bigger list. When I did the original list, I did like a list of about 35, and then I said, okay, let me do a quick scan on these 35, and then pick out what's a reasonable amount. And this particular company was actually on the next tier up,
Right.
and so they never did get a letter, as it turned out, but it was so strange when I ended up there and I went back to that original list and I said, oh yes, I remember these folks. This headhunter called me and said, I have this job, and I think you're a perfect fit for it. So
That's interesting. I've always noticed that
yeah.
when you take action, universe, whatever you want to call it, like it pushes, it gives you something back, often from an area you're not expecting, not from the 18 letters, but just because you have the faith and the perseverance and the savvy to take action, you get rewarded. And it's not always from the place you expect.
No, I mean, the reality of it, look, I'm a big believer in the universe, and I'm a very, very intuitive businesswoman. And, again, moving into action is critical, but being able to do that background research and understand how to build that relationship to begin with, look,
well, that opening line is worth that's worth our time today on the podcast. I mean, that was gold. That was good.
Yeah.
And that's crafted.
Look, I have a thing that I call the sort of the billboard method of content. Think about your first line or your first paragraph. It's got to be billboard. If you can't capture them in 7 seconds, forget it. It's over. And that's as true today as it was back in the old days. In the pre-internet, pre-digital, pre-everything we are now.
Yeah.
You can't just, I see so much stuff where people just throw it out there and they sort of fly by the seat. And I fly by the seat of my pants sometimes too. But again, it depends on what you're trying to achieve.
Right.
When you're going after a C-suite executive, whether it's a CEO or a CMO or a CFO or whoever it is, the reality of it is you got to know who you're talking to. You got to understand their world. Yeah. And there is nothing like, research.
What their pain, like also what their pain is. I mean, what keeps them up if you're a CEO of a company, I mean, you got a lot of sleepless nights. I mean, so, what's the thing that keeps you up most at night, within your company? Because you're one big decision away from getting axed off the, getting fired. And, so I'm sure that's always top of mind, or, your board of directors is probably asking questions of you all the time. Like, you got to meet expectations. And, I can't imagine being, in that situation or that position, within some companies. I mean, smaller companies is not a big deal, but like larger companies, I mean, it's just probably pretty stressful.
I was lucky enough that most of my clients have always allowed me to go beyond just the PR and the marketing, so that I could see and understand how their companies and the kinds of decisions that they were constantly being confronted with. If many of my clients were like regional or division presidents of a bigger corporation that answered not just to a board of directors wholly, but usually to some other level of executive authority.
Yeah, right.
And, I got to see that and I got to witness that. And that was an education in itself for me to understand how, it is like a big puzzle. And you really have to try to find those places where, it is pain. You do have to, and even, I've done a lot of work for family companies, and sometimes, even though they don't have big boards of directors and they usually can't be hired and fired, there's a lot of stresses that are very different in a privately held family-run company versus a big public company.
Yeah.
And it's the same with nonprofits, because again, nonprofits are usually run by a board and they have funders who, while they don't necessarily get involved in any day-to-day management of a nonprofit, without their funds, that nonprofit is not going to exist. So their opinions matter.
Yep.
So it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge.
So one of my last questions, and then Sean, whatever you have, but I'm just curious, how did you close out the letter? I mean, to get that, call to action or the meeting.
Yeah.
What was that like?
So essentially what I did was, at the time I was flying back and forth between Chicago and New Orleans. I was coming here for 2 weeks and staying in New Orleans 2 weeks. Because of course I still had clients in New Orleans that I was dealing with. So, it wasn't like I could just come here and do. And so what I would do is when I finally saw my dates, I would send a batch of letters out and I would say, I'm going to be in Chicago these 2 weeks. And essentially what I said to him was, I would like to, please give me 30 minutes of your time, because I would really like to hear your thoughts. Praise and acknowledgement in those paragraphs. And then finally, in the close, I just would basically say, I'm going to be in touch with you shortly. And then I would call. And the minute that I would call, I would get put right through. When
you called, had most of them seen by that time, had they seen the letter?
Every single one of them.
Right.
Every single one of them. And I will say that their assistants had already been put on alert to be on the lookout for my call.
Oh, interesting.
Because I did not, other than the two people, that one who wouldn't see me and one who sent me somewhere else, all the other ones, basically, they knew who I was when I called.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, yes, Miss Broussard. He's waiting for your call. She's waiting for your call.
Do you think it's because, do you think if you had not sent it FedEx, like the urgency of that, do you think that would have been different had you sent it like any other?
Yeah, no, I definitely think FedEx made a difference. And, I've done things like that when I'm delivering proposals to clients and I know I'm pitching against other people. I put elaborate packages together and have it delivered by courier. All kinds of things that I've done like that, where, again, this is about how do you stand out from the crowd? It's much harder today because everybody does everything by email. But guess what? When you do something by snail mail or FedEx, you get more response today than you do when you send it by email.
Definitely.
Unless I have a direct referral via email to somebody, they're going to either get a handwritten letter from me, a typed letter, or they're going to get something in some other media format than email, because, they're busy.
Yeah. I mean, these CEOs are getting 100 plus emails a day. Easy.
Yeah. Look, I run basically a one-person consulting practice. I hire contractors as I need them to fulfill client contracts, but I have 4 email boxes that come into Bismarck Group and do 4 different things for me to sort my mail.
Yeah.
So, you got to understand who you're talking to, and this is all about targeting and research and all the stuff that, you know, people seem to think that in our technology world that we don't need any of that.
Yeah.
You know, look, I love technology as much as anyone. It helps me greatly, but you can't expect to have a successful campaign, whether it's this kind of a campaign or it's some other kind of direct response, or it's an advertisement, whatever the campaign is. If you don't have that solid research behind the scenes and understand to the nth degree who your client, who your target audience is, and what are you trying to solve for them, and what is their problem? Because a lot of times people don't even understand what their problem is. What's the issue? What's the pain point? People don't even understand that sometimes. They just are there trying to, I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm here to listen. I'm really here to listen and learn, because that's how you build relationships.
Yeah. That's good. So Joanna, I'll wrap up with, I've got 2 questions I want to wrap up with. I think you just answered the first one, but if you want to go a different route, you can. You said you've been in business for about 30 years. I was curious, like, what's the number one change you've seen in the last 30 years? And then what's the one thing that has stayed the same? And then I'll ask one more question after that.
I think, you know, the biggest change, of course, is technology. You know, if I would have had the tools then that I have now, I'd be retired and living in the south of France. You know, because I was, you know, I'm a hustler, and I love the world of business, and I love what I do. You know, I'm still doing it. So that's been a big piece. I think the big thing right now, of course, everybody in the marketing and PR and communications business, everybody's worried about AI.
Yeah, that was my next question. So yeah, we'll just go there.
Yeah. So
just get it out of the way. Let's get it.
Yeah. So, you know, AI is the big thing right now. And here's my thoughts right now about AI. Number one, I think it's fabulous. It's a great tool, but we have to remember it's a tool. It's not a be all end all. You know, it's like social media. Everybody wants to say social media is the be all end all. I'm sorry. It's a tool. It's one more tool in the toolbox.
Yep.
And AI is one more tool in the toolbox.
Yes.
You know, the nuances, like being able to do that research. It may be able to go in and do that research on all those CEOs for me. It will never be able to figure out, at least not yet. Eventually, I think it will. But right now, it can't go in and do that nuanced work, that strategic work that needs to be done to really make a piece of content pop.
Yeah.
Or an opening to a letter, immediately form a connection.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, I love AI. I love what it does. You know, I sit on a nonprofit. I'm president of a nonprofit board here in my neighborhood for our library. And when we do our newsletters, part of what we do is we ask AI to do one piece in some literary figure's writing style. So like we did a newsletter last month and we asked it, you know, write this thing about, you know, join us as a member in the style of Jane Austen. And
Yes.
it was
that.
like, boom, spit it right out.
We've talked about that.
We put the copy in, it spit Jane Austen right out. It was fabulous. So, you know, it's got some great uses to do some really creative and innovative things, but it's not the be all end all.
Sure.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I've been telling clients and colleagues, I'm like, don't even think of it as a tool. Think of it as a toy, especially right now, because I think you'll have more fun with it and you'll have more creativity with it. And I do that stuff all the time. I'm like, you know, writing the voice of Mark Twain, write me a Seinfeld episode about this weird little thing about our business. And it just nails it, you know, and it's actually enhanced my creativity, I think.
I love it. But, you know, I'm, like I said earlier, I'm a geek at heart.
Yeah.
The one thing that I think hasn't changed, that to get back to the second part of your question, the thing that I think has not changed, and I think it's something that people still sometimes miss, is that like I said, business is about relationships.
Mhm.
And while social media is designed to try to help us build relationships, there's no substitution for that one-on-one.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
spewing out to 1 million followers or 1 million, would much rather be here in this one-on-one with you guys, even though we're not in the same room. We're in a pretty intimate setting and we're pretty one-on-one. And to me, that is the thing that has not really changed in all of this. No matter how much technology you have, there's really no substitution for the ability that we have as humans to create relationship. And
Yeah.
we want to do business. Business is about creating those relationships.
Well, it's like that letter that you said, I mean, that you, that opening line of your letter, you know, AI, I can't imagine AI, you know, writing something like that, right? I mean, AI is going to get right to the point.
Yeah.
But you developed a connection, right? I mean, that's the importance. I mean, you're connecting on a personal level with people. I mean, CEOs who are really just people, you know,
Yeah.
ultimately,
Yeah.
and you're connecting with them, you know,
Yeah.
right from the start.
Well, a business is literally, by definition, a business is just a piece of paper, you know, right?
Yeah.
It's literally like a set of words that construct a business formation.
Yeah.
And those pieces of paper, an LLC, an S corp, whatever it is, cannot sign checks.
No.
They can't
No.
authorize checks.
No.
It's only a person that can do that. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people forget that it's a human being that has to give the authority to say, yes, let's write this check. Let's bring this person on. Let's do business with this person.
Right.
So I have a question for you guys before we get into wrap up.
Cool.
Okay.
So I gave you all my secrets. Was it what you expected?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that you know, we hear these themes with different guests and different times, you know, and just our own experience. But yeah, for sure, like like I wrote down a couple lessons: find your peers, research. Those are just timeless ideas. But yeah, that first line that you used was really, really good. I even wrote down the time as far as a bookmark there, to just really get people's attention. And I just love the idea that you didn't go after the business, you went after the relationship.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to get caught up in hitting your numbers, you know, blah, 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 blah. But that doesn't happen outside of a relationship. It happens because of the relationship. So if you skip that nuance or that thing,
it goes back to that old Dan Kennedy, Sean, that we've talked about in the past. You know, Dan Kennedy. I don't know if you've.
I know Dan.
I know Dan
Kennedy. I haven't seen him in years, but I know Dan.
But you know, one of the things Dan Kennedy's always said, whether you're even if you're in B2B sales or marketing, like if you're reaching out to a purchasing person or a purchasing officer or a purchasing manager, or it doesn't matter what level within that organization, there is a human being behind that, right? And they have, you know, they have their own fears and they have their own trepidations and difficulties every day in their job. So you can't be marketing or selling to a company. You have to be selling to a human being, and you have to know it. I mean, you gave a great example. You're selling not to a company, you were selling to a human being, and the human being happened to be the CEO of the company, but whoever that person is, who is the, you know, kind of the person that's going to make the final decision within the organization. You know, you're going to the CEO. For some people, it may be the, you know, the purchasing officer or the, you know, a plant manager or a, you know, a different level within an organization. Whoever that is, it's a human being, and you're not selling to the company. You're selling to their needs and their fears, their wants, what they have, you know, what their dreams are. So
I'll add one thing, Joanna, that I kind of took away from this, and that is, I think oftentimes we think these gestures, these marketing plans, these campaigns have to be just these huge, like I need 1 million followers, I need whatever, right? You sent 18 letters and started an entirely new life off of
Right.
18 letters.
That's right.
Like that's a
Bingo.
pretty powerful idea.
Mhm.
If you really sit with it, like you can. I have a friend who says, if you make a list of 100 people and you call everyone and you ask the same question for whatever it is you need, he says, I bet you won't get through 10 before you get a yes.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's pretty true. I think that's still true today. Now, if
Mhm.
you're asking it in a shotgun approach by email, probably not. But if you do the research and you do things you're talking about, you can create an entirely new life with 18 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's, it was amazing to me to see the kind of response, and some of those guys have retired or moved on, but occasionally I still run into them around Chicago.
Mhm.
And some of us are connected on LinkedIn now. So it was a very interesting experience, and it's one that I've never forgotten.
Yep.
And sometimes when you grow up in a smaller market, you're much more focused on the relationship piece
Mhm.
than when you get into bigger markets. And of course, social media makes us think. I think we forget that behind all that stuff, there are people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Behind the numbers and the
You know,
stats and all that.
Yeah, we look at all that stuff, but the truth is, it's just a person there.
Yeah.
And in the end, stats kind of don't mean anything, because if you don't have a relationship with that person, you can have the best stats in the world, but if you never aren't able to connect so that you can sell or whatever you're trying to do, what good does it do?
Did you send some follow? I'm just curious. Did you send a follow up to these people after your?
Oh yeah, they all got thank you notes. Also sent
Yeah.
by Federal Express. I sent all
That's
the thank
awesome.
you notes by Federal Express. Everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's a
absolutely.
good lesson too, because you got to finish out the.
Absolutely.
You had the meeting, and then
And she
That's
called.
cool that you FedEx the thank you notes too. That's
Oh,
cool.
absolutely. Yeah. No. I've been in the business long enough to know when you're going to do it, you do it right.
Yeah.
And you do very complete work. So.
And it's amazing how long people will remember that. I mean,
Mhm.
I've gotten referrals from people at companies that I worked with 10 years ago
Yeah.
that will still send me a referral today, just out of the blue. And because they've moved on, I've moved on, but what I think that's one thing that's nice about, cell phones today is you can take your number with you. And once people have your number, they can find you, or social media too.
Absolutely.
Like people need to find you, they can find you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you'll be surprised. I'm always amazed just, how far and how long those relationships last.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They may not happen every week or every year. It may be 5 years between them, but you'll get one of those connections that you made 10 years down the road, and it's worth $50,000 or $100,000. That's
For
crazy.
sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's worth the time and effort to do all the things you did, even if you don't get an immediate response. There is a long-term payoff almost every time.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Well, Joanna, this has been fun.
Yes.
Where can people find out more about you? I've got your website pulled up. Is there anywhere else that's so Bismarck, BIZMARK?
Yeah, they can go there. They can go to my LinkedIn profile and direct message me. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm out there. I'm probably not as visible as I ought to be, but I'm pretty visible. Yeah, go to my personal page on LinkedIn. Yeah, there I am.
There you are.
So yeah, use that, and please direct message me. Send me an email.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm pretty out there, so you can find
For sure.
me.
And who's your ideal client for Bismarck?
My ideal client is typically a CEO.
Okay.
It could be a managing partner at a professional service firm. It could be an executive director at a nonprofit, but it's usually somebody who's in charge in a position of authority. And I pretty much work with clients of just about any size. I think my sweet spot is probably clients that are running businesses 3 million plus.
Okay.
3 to maybe 50 million, maybe not quite that big, but that's pretty much,
So big enough to be out there, probably not have their own team.
Yeah, exactly. Most of my clients don't have a big team, or they're looking to put a team together. So a lot of times I can go in there as a fractional chief marketing officer or a fractional chief communications officer and help them put teams together. Okay. So, lots of different ways, because I have such a generalist background that I can work with people.
Cool.
As far as industry, I've worked in probably 40 or 50 different industries. Okay. So industry, for me, industry doesn't matter, because first of all, I got background in a lot, but I'm also a great researcher. And
you're a great example. Sean and I we have this ongoing discussion of niche versus generalist, and there you go. You're a generalist, and you got it.
She's a niche at PR, but then a generalist at who you can serve.
Exactly.
I'm going to recommend a book to you guys. If you have not read Range by David Epstein.
We've talked about that book. Yeah.
I love that book. He is so on the money with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yep, for sure.
It goes against all my copywriting training, but I think there's something to the broadness, just because of the depth that it brings, for sure. So,
yeah.
Well, Joanna, this is fun. Jonathan, you have anything else you want to?
No, I like your doors, by the way. I just had to mention that. Those are cool doors in the back room. I don't know.
Kind of look New Orleans, actually.
Kind
of old school.
I got a porch in the front and a porch in the back, so I feel very at home. It does feel very much like New Orleans.
Well, very good. Joanna, thank you so much for your time today. And we'll be sure, once we post this on or publish this to the website, obviously you'll get sent a link.
Okay.
And we'll have a link, obviously, on our homepage to your website and all that good stuff. So
great. Jonathan,
thank you again.
Sean, thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like I've spent all the time talking, and the truth is I would love to know more about both of you guys and what you're doing, because it sounds like you could be resources in my network. So
I've already sent you a LinkedIn connection. So
okay, great.
There you go.
We can definitely set up another call.
Absolutely.
Super.
For certain. Hey, have a great weekend, Joanna. We're going to send you back to the green room for a minute, and then Sean and I are going to close out the show. And if you want to hang tight there for a second, we'll talk to you on the back end.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks again.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of good lessons from that. Sean, my biggest takeaway, obviously she had a great opening on that, but I will tell people out there that FedEx is money.
Still works.
Money.
Yes.
FedEx. If you're not FedExing to your target, your target market, or your top, prospects in your industry, sending them a FedEx overnight, you are crazy.
I think it's funny how people will drop $1,000 on Facebook ads to random people, but they won't spend $200 on the top 10 prospects in their niche.
Absolutely.
For a FedEx package. Like, it's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah. So
top of mind, it's relevant, and like she said, it gets it right past the gatekeeper. Hey, this must be important. I better get this to my boss's desk right away.
Yeah, and it shows there's a little bit more effort. Like, there's just so much going on, like subconsciously, like consciously, everything. It's just still such a powerful tool.
Superpower. That's what I call it. Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Well, this has been fun. Sean, as always, you guys can find us at persuasionbythepint.com. You can find us on all of your social media platforms, your podcast platforms, whether you listen to Apple or Stitcher Radio, Spotify, iHeart, you name it.
We're huge on Twitch.
Twitch is like that's like where we spend all of our time, which we don't. But you can find us anywhere. And you can also find us on Persuasion by the Pint. You can find us over at our Facebook group, facebook.com/Persuasion by the Pint. And Sean, it's been fun, man. We'll see you guys next week. Have a great weekend.
See ya.
All right.